This conference will now be recorded.
Commissioners meeting. At this time, I would like to ask Reverend Warren Hill, who would lead us with Bethel Baptist Church, to lead us in prayer with Mr. Martin. Father, with the pledge, please. All stand, please.
Pray with me. Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. Thank you for those that are serving our county as commissioners. Pray that you would please be with them, help them as they take care of the business of this county. Pray that you draw them closer to you and help them make the right decisions, best in your eyes and best for this county. Pray that you give them knowledge, wisdom, and discernment, and all those that will make presentations tonight or speak. Pray for them also. We just thank you for all you do. Help us to be more like you. In Jesus' name we pray.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can I get a motion on the consent item?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mr. Boyd to approve, second by Mr. Ellis. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Special recognition of employees of years of service. Commissioners, step down front, please. Years of service for our county employees. Some of them won't be here tonight, so I'm gonna call their name, but make sure when you see them that you thank them for the time that they've spent. We value each and every one of them for the time of service with the county. Sharon Standenberry, DSS, 5 years of service. Cheryl Batten, Cheryl here. Yep. Come up forward, please, ma'am. Ms. Smith.
This is Cheryl Batten. She has been with the Bladen County Department of Social Services for 5 years after she retired from the Bladen County Schools system. She retired from their budget area. She came to the agency as an office assistant, and listen to this, she fulfilled her mother's position that her mother filled several years ago. So that was very special with her coming to our agency. But after in our office assistant area, she did advance to become our administrative officer working with our budget. She's been there since February of 2021. She is doing a remarkable job. There's a lot to learn with the DSS budget, and I think that she has got this under control. So Cheryl, we certainly appreciate your time to the county and your time with us at DSS. Thank you so much.
On behalf of the county and the commissioners, we thank you for your 5 years of service. I look forward to thank you so much. Pleasure. Yes, ma'am. Amelia Batten, EMS, 10 years of service. Demetria Lassane Miles, Health, 5 years. I understand she's not here. Kirby Graham, Housekeeping, is not here either, 5 years of service. Monica Smith with the library for 5 years. Al Coleman, detention, 5 years. Dominique Davis, detention, 10 years. Again, thank these folks, please, when you see them. We really appreciate them. On retirees, Kent Porter. Kent Porter tonight. 25 years, Kent. Make sure you thank him when you see him. We appreciate the work that he's done over the years. Burtis Michelle McCoy. No, she's no? Okay, imagine. Bart, make sure that you thank her so much for her years of service. Jane Waters, Division of Age, 29 years. In grateful appreciation to Jane E. Walters for dedicated service to the people of Bladen County as Nutrition Site Manager, presented by the Bladen County Board of Commissioners, given this 18th day of April 2022. Years of service from June of 93 to March of 22. We thank you so much on behalf of the commissioners and the citizens of the county and the county manager and all of the staff. And you know, a lot of people retire and then they come back and work a little bit, so get a little homesick.
I've already got homesick.
There you go. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
I would just like to say that Jane was a great employee. She is a great friend. I've enjoyed working with her in the few years that we have worked together. I started at 17, and she has treated every one of her clients and her co-workers like family. And I just want to let her know that I appreciate her so much.
And I appreciate Karen so much too. She has really encouraged me, and she just, like she said, she's a special friend, and she's a good boss lady. I really do appreciate that. I would like to thank the county too.
Thank you.
You know, ladies like to talk.
Well, that's all right. You know what I tell my lady after 40-something years? Man, you got the floor.
That's what my husband.
I hang behind you. In front of every man, there's a good woman. Without you, we wouldn't be here.
But I would like to say just a few words.
Sure, you go right ahead.
But I do thank the county. I thank all the people that I work with. And the lady that hired me was Miss Katie Meshaw. Do y'all remember her? She was a dear boss lady. And let's remember Joan Allen. She was my boss. And let's remember her and really remember her in our prayers.
That's great.
And then there was Kelly Robinson. So I've had some really nice boss people.
Thank you. We
Boss
appreciate
ladies.
you.
And I do appreciate, like I said, I appreciate the county, and I appreciate everything that y'all done for me, all of you. And I wish you so much happiness and joy and love, and I do appreciate y'all.
Thank you so much.
And I just thank God for this opportunity.
Let's take 5 minutes and go back for reception. Anybody like to step out for 5 minutes? We've got refreshments in the room.
This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you. Matter of interest to commissioners. Okay. Moffett Nichols, Don York, Senior Coastal Plan.
Would you mind if I sit down?
Make yourself at home, ma'am.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I appreciate Greg Martin inviting me to present to you a brief summary of our status of the Lock and Dams 2 and 3 project. I'm going to sit here and see the slides, and unless someone. Okay. I can say next slide. Don York, Senior Coastal Planner with Moffett Nichol. I'm out of Wilmington, so again, appreciate taking the time tonight. We've been working with the Bladen County, Greg Martin, and Lisa now since about 2016. We have been working with the state Division of Water Resources, the Port of Wilmington, Fish and Wildlife Service, and other entities on federal and state grant funds that have been awarded to Bladen County for the historical restoration of spawning fish to move upstream of Lock and Dams 2 and 3. So we've been working on this project for several years. We have been on a little hiatus on the last year or so because there has been an ongoing federal study. So we have been waiting for the outcome of that study. Currently, we have been told that that study is still on hold. So we have decided to go ahead and move forward. Next slide, please. And you probably cannot read this at all, but basically this is just a little overview for you to understand the original intent of the project. And basically this was a comprehensive watershed-based strategy to really help improve getting anadromous fish upstream. We're talking about striped bass, American shad, other species that move from the lower estuary into fresh water to spawn. That's their historical spawning grounds. This is basically to help access those grounds upstream, Again, Bladen County has received up to about $3.4 million since about 2016, and we have been under contract with you since then for field studies, modeling, engineering design, and I'll go through that just in brief. Again, a goal of the project is to develop a nature-like fishway over lock and dams 2 and 3. It also is to incorporate recent modifications to fish passage designs that have been developed by USGS and Fish and Wildlife Service, and also to help stabilize the integrity of the locks and dams to ensure that they are maintained based on the Corps of Engineers authorized use of those federal projects. And of course, also just to make sure that we keep in hand the idea of recreational fishing and industry and all the stakeholders in the Cape Fear, keeping their interest in mind as well as Bladen County. Next slide, please. I wanted to bring up the Cape River Partnership is a partnership. Some of you have attended meetings in the past, but it's a loose coalition of stakeholders in the river, and they have 3 major goals. This partnership was first developed by NOAA back in 2013, and one of their main goals is to restore access to historic migratory fish habitat. And that was really basically the premise of why this project was so important in the Cape Fear River Basin. It is one of the most important projects for restoring fish stocks, fish populations in the Cape Fear River. Next slide, please. This is just a brief slide, just kind of, again, detailing some of the species that we're focused on. Again, there are 3 major locks and dams that were originally constructed in the early 1900s by the Corps of Engineers. This is all one federal project that is congressionally authorized to be maintained by the Corps of Engineers. It is a federal project. So as Bladen County, as a non-federal entity, we are coordinating and partnering with the Corps to work through their process to review and understand what can be done at the locks and dams to allow for fish passage, but also to help sustain and maintain that congressionally authorized use and navigation. Next slide, please. Again, we really started with this overarching rapids concept. This was originally constructed at Lock and Dam 1 back in 2012, 2013 by Dr. Luther Adlin and the Corps of Engineers. Dr. Luther Adlin is on our team as well as a supporting engineer and designer. So we are utilizing this concept moving forward as part of our alternatives analysis of what can be feasibly built at Lock and Dams 2 and 3 to maintain the structure, to continue to allow the use of the reservoir upstream of the dam, but also to allow for fish passage. So again, this is a rock structure. If you've been to Lock and Dam 1, then you have seen the rock arch weir. Next slide, please. So Lock and Dam 1, just speaking of that real briefly, that was constructed, again, the rock arch weir, by the Corps of Engineers at Lock and Dam 1 back in 2013, and that was for mitigation for the work that they did in the Wilmington Harbor deepening back in the late 2000s. And this was constructed, it was monitored for several years and determined that it wasn't passing fish as well as it was supposed to, based on the design. So if you go to the next slide, this shows that there was, again, quite a bit of monitoring on these 4 species, and it noted that there was some fish passage of some of these species, but just not to the percentage that we really wanted to. We're talking maybe, just a few sturgeon, which are federally endangered, and American shad. They did the best, but they are the smallest bodied of the 4 species, and then striped bass, unfortunately, just wasn't showing any progress getting past Lock and Dam 1. Next slide, please. So based on all of the monitoring done by the Wildlife Resources Commission, Division of Marine Fisheries Service, and with support from grants and also local partners such as Cape River Watch, we went and modified Lock and Dam 1, the rock arch weir, and what you see in the lower right-hand corner is what you will see today. That is a modification that was completed back in November. That is to allow fishways, as you'll see in the upper right-hand corner. That was the original design, and that shows 3 fishways to allow fish to be able to get over and through that rock arch weir. So this is allowing for the increased gap width for larger species, such as striped bass and sturgeon, and also allowing for deeper pools so that they can rest in those pools. Next slide, please. So again, Moffitt Nichols has been working with the county since about 2016 on engineering and design work. Again, we have taken a little year a hiatus to understand what the federal project, the outcome of that. But we have gone through data collection, field investigations. We have completed preliminary design. We've been working with the Corps on alternatives as well as stakeholders. We have talked with the Corps about dam removal, and at this time, based on there are discussions with them, that is not an option at this time. Perhaps later on, when things change, ownership may change. That is something that's been talked about now for the last couple of years. So we're continuing to move forward with what we know is an option, is a feasible option. Next slide, please. So again, status of the task that we've completed, we have completed the basic design to allow us to understand exactly what's going to go, what are the factors and criteria to understanding what are some of the alternatives. The hydrologic and hydraulic studies, I'll show you just a little bit of the outcome of some of those studies here. And then we've also completed the preliminary engineering, and we are planning to submit a preliminary draft of our design to the Corps for their initial feedback. As you'll see in the bottom left, some of the alternatives developed. Again, we have to evaluate several alternatives to understand what is the most, least environmental, practical, and feasible options. We have to look at it from a cost perspective, an environmental perspective, what's the least damaging. So again, if you go to the next slide, we'll look at a couple different alternatives that we feel are probably the most feasible at this time to move forward with getting feedback from the Corps of Engineers. And both Lock and Dam 2 and 3, they both have their constraints, and they each have their own, limitations with result, based on who are the users upstream of the water reservoir, what are some of the limitations on the adjacent land and the property, the slope of the river at that point, and also because these locks and dams have been in place for so long, especially at Lock and Dam 2, it was built earlier in the Lock and Dam 3, it resulted in a very large scour hole, and about 54-foot depth scour hole. Just recently, a couple of years ago, the Corps did fix the scour hole, not quite to the full extent, so we do have to take that into account into our design. So you'll see here, we are, both for Lock and Dams 2 and 3, are looking at a downstream rock arch weir as the most feasible option at this time, and that's going to basically duplicate what you would see at Lock and Dam 1, which is that downstream rock arch weir. And that seems to be, from a design standpoint, and then also just from a feasibility standpoint of getting those fish upstream, and also from a cost standpoint, the most cost effective. Next slide, please. Again, if you notice, you'll notice that if you go back to Lock and Dam 2, there was a large sort of shoreline bank erosion on that far side. That does take into account how we need to design the rock arch weir. And as you'll see here at Lock and Dam 3, you really don't have that. Lock and Dam 3 was built in the 1930s, and they got smart at that point and built a timber crib matting downstream of the dam. So therefore, when you have that water moving downstream, you don't have that scour hole as a result. So there will be a less tonnage of rock material that would have to be filled for Lock and Dam 3, resulting in a lower cost overall. Next slide, please. So again, the hydraulic analysis that we have developed, again, downstream alternative for both Lock and Dam 2 and 3, based on, again, the current civil works authorization, that's that congressional federal authorization for Lock and Dams 1, 2, and 3. It maintains that the Corps needs to have navigation capabilities through the lock chamber. Although we don't have commercial navigation at this time in the Cape River, at this far upstream, they still need to be able to maintain navigation based on their congressional authorization. So based on that, we will be submitting documentation for the Corps to review as part of their what they call Section 408 review. And that just means they need to be sure that whatever we propose isn't going to have a negative impact on the federal authorization. All right, please, next slide. This is just a couple, I'm going to go through these pretty fast. These are just a couple of snapshots, again, of what we are proposing to move forward with. Again, this is the Lock and Dam 2 alternative plan view for a rock arch weir. Again, you can see on the far side of the shoreline that large sort of scour erosive shoreline. At this time, we're proposing to not fill that in. That should fill in over time. If you move to the next slide, I'm going to show you some of the results of the modeling effort. This is just a baseline condition. This is what the field investigation and surveys showed us, exactly what Lock and Dam 2 looks like in the field based on a 3D model. Next slide, please. And so we evaluated fish passage. We want to be able to design something over multiple flows. So as you know, the river floods, we get droughts, and so we have spring flows or flood conditions, we have fall, and summer typically is a lower flow with less water. So we wanted to be able to evaluate over different flow conditions. I'm only showing you a low flow condition. We went all the way up to 10,000 CFS, which is a flooded condition. That would mean that the water would be straight across the dam crest. But at 1,500, that's a very low flow condition. That's a kind of normal low flow condition, and we wanted to look at exactly how is the water moving across what we consider to be sort of a constructed rock arch weir. So as you can see, red is a higher velocity with blues being lower. And you can see the gaps in the weirs. Next slide, please. This is just showing the streaming flow downstream, and you can see the ebbs and the ebbing and the tidal flows. So that is kind of giving us an idea of sediment deposition over time and how that scour hole, Lock and Dam 2, would reflect the design here. Next slide, please. Again, just another snapshot of the 3D model that we prepared, showing again how water is moving into the far side. As you can see, we've proposed to build a berm to allow for fish to not get caught up into that erosive area and to make sure that they find the rock arch weir. Next slide, please. This is a Lock and Dam 3 alternative plan view. Again, the downstream rock arch weir option is our preferred option at this time. It's definitely, from a constructability standpoint, it's a much smaller footprint. Next slide, please. Again, baseline condition and a 3D model. This was built by our engineers to show, so we can actually zoom in and actually adjust and adapt the design as we need to based on feedback from the Corps of Engineers. Next slide, please. Again, going back through the low flow conditions, just looking how the water and the velocities change over those rock arch weirs. Next slide, please. Same thing. Again, you don't have the resulting scour hole at the end, so you can tell that's a little bit different the way the water moves across those rocks and downstream. Again, this would show us if there are any issues with the shoreline stabilization and where we may need to do a little bit shoring up. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide, so hopefully I didn't go through that too fast. Our next steps are, again, to continue to coordinate with the Corps of Engineers. We'd like to submit a preliminary permit package to them for their initial feedback on the design. Once that occurs and we receive their feedback, we'll then host another stakeholder meeting. We actually haven't had a stakeholder meeting in person on this project since 2018. So that was, but we have continued to maintain communication with various stakeholders, especially the resource agencies. So they're all very well aware of what's going on. That's a snapshot of just some of the stakeholders that are in the Cape Fear River Basin that are really focused on these projects. We'll also need to develop and complete the environmental assessment that will go with the permitting package towards the end. And most importantly, not to be short-sighted and just focus on next steps. My goal is to find funding to fund the implementation of these two projects. Our goal is not just to get permits and sit on them, but to actually find the funding to construct these projects. I'd like to just remind the commissioners and the attendees here that not a single dollar is coming out of Bladen County's budget, and I want to maintain that. We want to be sure that, as partners and as good shepherds of these funds, I cannot again thank Lisa and Greg enough for their handling of the financial side of this. and giving us the opportunity to move forward with the engineering design. There's already been conversations about the funding for construction. There's a lot of interest in this. So I think, again, it's a great project. It's a benefit to the county from a recreational and tourism standpoint, and also just from a habitat restoration and overall resilience study to maintain those locks and dams and the reservoirs.
My question, and I've had this question asked of me, with the consideration and the conversation of sale, like you mentioned before, how does this affect the work going on and going forward and funding available, the potential of sale of the locking down?
So it's a great question. At this time, based on my communication with the Corps of Engineers, there is no moving forward with changing of ownership of locks and dams 1, 2, and 3. That could change. There's a lot of interest from the state. There's been a lot of interest from the utilities. If that does happen, there's no harm in having permits in place for rock arch weirs for fish passage structures, because again, that study is uncertain. The passing of the ownership is uncertain. We want to make good use of the grant funds that we have and do the good work that needs to be done.
So I think you answered my question. My question would be, does the Corps own the locks and dams?
Yes, sir.
So why aren't they held accountable to keep them repaired and maintained? Because we commissioners, and Greg and myself especially, are dealing with the Kelly Dyke, which they inspected and they failed the inspection, and we're sitting over there with no dike, and they won't touch it because they give it back to the community.
Right.
So if they're owners of it, that's what they told me now, they're supposed to keep it up. So why you got sky holes and stuff like that?
Right. And that's a great question, and that's one that we certainly have asked over the years. They just recently received $6.5 million through the infrastructure spending bill to actually conduct the maintenance necessary on the miter gates for the lock chambers themselves, because since Hurricane Florence, they haven't been able to be opened fully.
One thought. So what they're requiring us to do, everything we're trying to do with the Kelly dikes, dams, we have to go through the Corps for their approval, even though they don't own it. But if they're going to take it back, it's got to go through there. So I just really don't understand why they're not being held accountable to repair our locks and dams, since they're the owners, and they're holding our feet to the fire to repair that Kelly dikes in a certain way. I don't understand. I mean, I ain't trying to put you on the spot.
No, it's just a complicated process, one that I don't fully understand myself. You have regulatory and civil work side, so we actually have to go through both sides. We have to, in order to get permits, we have to get authorization from both. Again, I'm not familiar with the Kelly Dyke system and that process of going through for authorization, but I know that must have been very frustrating. The locks and dams, I mean, they've been going through the Section 216 disposition study to understand and evaluate disposing of the locks and dams to a non-federal partner. Unfortunately, that has halted completely, and we can make some assumptions as to why, but I don't have the full answers.
I was going to ask you, Dawn, as far as the rocks that are there now, were they put there how many years ago? I thought that was a jumping system, basically an upstream.
At lock and dams 2 and 3?
At 2.
Yeah, I think both of those were kind of shored up. I think both of them had some, the crest of the dams, there's a concrete cap added sometime in the last 20 years. I can't give you the exact.
But the boulders that were put there, they've been put there within the last 10, right?
That was to repair that scour hole.
Oh, you're talking about lock and dam 2?
At 2.
Oh, yeah, that was done in 2017, 18, 19.
Now I wonder what percent of the fish are actually getting upstream as compared to what it was 10 years ago. In other words, is it more successful now or is it less successful?
So lock and dam 2, the scour hole was only to fill the scour hole. So there's still 20, 30 feet of water at that location. So that was not meant for a fish passage structure. It was only to maintain the integrity, to make sure, because the actual erosiveness of the scour hole was actually moving towards the dam rather than downstream. It's actually undermining the dam. So they had to fill in that scour hole to ensure that the dam didn't fail.
But the person that, you Ms. York, right?
I'm sorry?
Ms. York?
Yes, sir.
I see your senior planner, and I know you're talking about development of the actual locks and how they operate. The question I want to ask is you mentioned recreational and fishing, tourists, and being a commissioner, I have heard a lot of people talk about the environmental situation that's going on in the river. Do you guys assess to see, because people really talk in the county, they don't want you to fish out the river. That is a common thing. And I'm asking, do y'all do an environmental studies to check to see if the recreational fishing is something that people can consume?
That's a great question. It's a great question. We personally do not. There are groups out there that are actively doing that right now. NC State, I know, is actively doing fish consumption studies, especially, I know, locally in Wilmington and just upstream of Wilmington. There are a lot of fish consumption warnings, especially for heavy metals, but also, of course, we do know now, based on research, that the PFAS and GenX is something that has been taken in the muscle of fish. That they did a quite extensive striped bass study to look at that. There is a publication on that. This, obviously, I'm not in a position to provide recommendations to people on fish consumption. But from a recreational standpoint, the Cape Fear is one of the few rivers where we have a moratorium on keeping striped bass. That's one of the favorite fish to be able to keep and, of course, either consume or let go. There is actually kind of a battle right now between the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries Service and the Wildlife Resources Commission to determine whether or not to open up the striped bass fishing because there is no natural spawning currently by striped bass because Wildlife Resources Commission has been putting those fish, little baby fry, downstream just to allow them to grow up and become kind of a stock population, but it's not being sustained by the native population. So that's not answering your question. What I can say is that UNCW, and I can provide this, they did a great study on understanding what recreational fishermen would be willing to pay, from a standpoint of gas, hotel, bait, all of those things. When folks go fishing, what would they be willing to pay to come fish in the Cape Fear River if they knew the fish stocks were there to provide for them for fishing? Because, the Roanoke River, there's a lot of great fishing spots in North Carolina. So we want to allow that to happen here in the Cape Fear.
So from what you're saying, is the population of the fish deteriorating?
Yes, sir.
In the Cape Fear River?
Yes,
It used to be big time numbers.
Would this enhance this effort you're doing with this?
This is their best bet. This is their best bet. We have 2 endangered sturgeon species, which, they were fished to almost extinction back in the early 1900s. And then, of course, striped bass, again, as I mentioned, no native spawning of a native population. American shad are doing a little bit better. They are able to get up, but it's very, very little compared to what it could be.
These things you talk about, like this study they did, can that be made available to Bladen? I've never seen that.
I absolutely would love to
Is
share
there
that.
a link or something that we could get, or where all this stuff is stored?
Absolutely. I am part of the coordinator of the Cape River Partnership. I try to keep that website updated. But I will send that to you along with that study, and I'll ask Greg to share that. Yeah.
On behalf of the commissioners, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Our communications, Kyle Randall, Vice President Marketing, Consumer Operations, and Jody Sanders, Plant Operations
Good evening, everyone. Good to see y'all again. We were in front of y'all a couple of months ago. I guess it was around November when we came down and wanted to give y'all an update of what STAR was doing in Bladen County due to the Bladen County broadband plan that has been put together, and we work with Greg and others on that. And so we're just trying to give y'all an update of where STAR is, where we have come so far, and kind of tell you some of our future plans that we have for Bladen County. Again, my name is Kyle Randall, and I'm the Vice President of STAR Communications. I'm over the marketing and customer operations. I'd like to first start out by saying, we appreciate everything y'all have done. We have filed for a USDA Reconnect 3 grant. This is the third round of the Reconnect grant. And STAR has filed a $25 million grant application to bring fiber optics and broadband to our area. It'll serve approximately about 3,500 homes, or past 3,500 homes. And thanks to y'all in Bladen County for writing us a recommendation for that grant application. We do appreciate that. And want to let you know a little bit how the grant works. The grant is obviously through the USDA. And what that means for us in Bladen County is not a dime will come out of Bladen County's coffers or pockets. It's all federal money. It's not coming out of our taxpayer base. It's not even coming from our constituents and our stockholders of Star Telephone, which most people in Bladen County are shareholders and stockholders of the cooperative. So this is federal dollars coming in. We submitted our application over a month ago. And we feel pretty strong. It's done by a point system. And as far as the East Coast goes, our points were about as high as you could get. So that should tell y'all that we're in pretty good shape, I would think. What this grant would do is that would solidify and bring fiber optic broadband to pretty much 100% of our served area in Bladen County. That means would be done at that point. So we just wanted to bring you up to that point of view. Also, again, no capital outlay for Bladen County. This is all federal dollars. And I'm going to turn it over to Joe real quick and talk about some projects we've started and completed since the last time we spoke to y'all.
Again, I'm Joseph Andrews, the plant operations manager, which means I oversee all the projects that we do as far as construction, fiber splicing. And I was going to use your map that you got up here to kind of give you an idea of the areas that we've already been in. We started way back at Bay Tree Lakes, putting in fiber project. We recently did a state grant that we call Moat Road and Pusey Store. So we've got fiber in this area. We've also come to Kelly, down in one of our problem areas off of Coley Road, NC 210 and 53, completely fibered that area over. Abbotsburg and south of Bladenboro, we have a large footprint there that we've done fiber to the home. We've also done fiber to home just outside of E-Town proper, which would be Peanut Plant Road, Commodity Road, Twisted Hickory, and down 242. We go through some more of these. Down there, the Harold's area, we've done Murphytown. We've also done
of East Arcadia?
Yes, ma'am.
If you pass East Arcadia School, you have a group there, they don't have service at all. They're Star telephone, but they don't have broadband. So Kennedy Store Road,
Okay, yeah, you brought that up to us last time, and I did some investigation, and with our sister cooperative, ATMC, there is supposed to be broadband done by Spectrum or Charter in that area. Now, that's what the mapping said when we went down there.
I think they did East Arcadia, but not Kennedy Store Road, because Star telephone served them.
Well, if it's in Star Telephone's territory, it's gonna get fiber.
Okay, so that's on one side of the street. On the other side, they're AT&T, and that would have been, I would think, Spectrum. But we thought, since you're doing,
One side of it,
you would do the other side?
we would have to, there's no road that I know of that Star goes down that doesn't serve both sides of the road.
Well, in Kennedy Store Road, you don't. One side you don't. They're 655, not 669.
Well, that's probably the latter boundary.
That's probably down toward the very end of our boundary. And a lot of times, just like with CenturyLink or Lumen now, what we've done years past, when they found what the boundary lines would be, they found a river or creek, and they would get this part of it, we would get this part of it. And that was a gentleman's agreement years ago when Star was founded. But to answer your question, if we're down the road and we're feeding customers down that road and somebody across the road asks for service, 9 times out of 10, they're gonna get service.
Okay, that's what.
Unless there's a regulatory issue. I gotta put that in there. Unless there's a regulatory issue that prevents us from being able to feed that.
Right. And, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The thing I'm looking at providing the fiber optic throughout the area. At one time, you spoke about, my concern is affordability and connectivity. Get it where
Good
people
point.
can access.
Absolutely.
And I'm trying to figure out, are y'all, through this federal program, are there any building incentives for connectivity, or how you got marketing this?
Dr. Goins asked me this last time we were here, and I brought an update for you.
Okay.
It's called the Affordable Care Program, ACP program. It was difficult to get through all the paperwork, but it was done, and it does afford, if you qualify due to the low income, you do get a discount on your broadband services. So it's a federal program. It's like, y'all remember the old Lifeline for telephones? It's the same thing now for broadband.
The reason I'm asking a question and what I'm trying to get to is I look at Spectrum come in and they have a service that they have like, they be marketing on TV, like hooking up to the services. And I'm trying to figure out, I haven't seen anything that Star is doing that giving that same type of program or.
Well, we do free installation. So, it's free installation, and if you qualify for the discount, you get the discount.
So, how are you marketing? Are you telling everybody this is dead?
Well, this has just come out. Like I said, since our last meeting, you asked about it, and it's just come out. The program has just come out. So we do have it. It's listed on our website, and we are required to advertise that as well. We've given it to the social services offices. We're trying to get the word out about it. Yes, sir.
Okay, that was my.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Right. Yes, sir.
Mr. Peterson, Grimsley Farm Road,
Grimsley Farm Road.
Abbotsford, just cross railroad track, right?
Grimsley Farm, be right outside of Abbotsford. That'll be taken care of on our state grant that we actually already got funded for as well.
That's part of what you're doing now.
Yes, sir. We're actually building from the Abbotsford CO and going all the way back to Bladen Borough and coming down and getting those customers off the Bladen Borough M131, all the way up to Hogwaller and that whole area. Yes, sir.
The other thing that I want to ask now, because I'm in stock service, and I know at one time I had a telephone line where I had to have a telephone connection in order to get broadband services.
Yes, sir.
That's where it ran the telephone line. The fiber optic, how do you distinguish between the fiber optic? Is it different rates on the fiber optic?
You do not have to have a telephone line anymore to get broadband.
Telephone lines are all out.
We still have a lot out there, believe it or not, for 911 purposes, alarm systems, and everything, but you are not required to buy a telephone line if you just want broadband.
So y'all can run it to them,
Yes,
give them access to it without the phone line.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
I think the kind of things that we need to.
No, absolutely. Good questions. Absolutely. Yeah.
Can I have a question on that?
Yes, sir.
Going down 701 prior to getting to Highway Patrol Station. You got Harrison Brothers Farms right there.
Yes, sir.
Right in front of it. I'm off the road maybe 300 yards. If I had a good arm, I could throw a rock. But I can't get service.
And that's
But we
due,
called Stardust and offered, so I'm asking that question, is that, I mean, that's right there at your office.
and that's to the regulatory issues with us and Century. Yes, sir.
Right. And
They kinda hit the-
neither one offered mine.
So neither one of those?
Neither one. So my point is, we're trying to reach everyone in the county. That's what we tell people. And it's easy for me to ask, like, you know, when they start complaining, I say, hey, I'm sorry, I'm a commissioner, I don't have it. And can't get nobody to tell me I'm going to get it.
Commissioner, would you mind giving me your exact address?
145 Ed Sessoms Road, and that would be listed on the parcel.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's in CenturyLink's traditional service territory, or I guess it's Lumen now.
Yeah, Lou.
Yes, sir.
Dublin, y'all have any part of Dublin?
Yes, sir. We have the Firebird that goes down, and I hope I say this right. There's always a joke at office about Lyle Landing Road.
Lyle Landing Road.
Lyle Landing Road. We had another guy, he always called it Lyle, and it would mess me up. But yeah, Lyle Landing Road, coming all the way back around by the winery and up to, Cape Owen Manor. We do also have, the high school. We come all the way up from what we call our Dublin unit, all the way into Dublin, and feed a few customers just outside and a few business customers inside of Dublin.
Have anything over about
We have a fiber there, right there at Bladen Community College.
Yes, sir, we sure do.
The script right there, people cannot get CenturyLink or y'all or anybody.
Give me an
Right on 41.
Yes, sir.
41.
Oh, 41 and 41.
I'm very close to the college, really college back this way.
Yeah.
There's several houses right there. Right there is the dumpster.
Would you give me an exact address if you don't?
I can give it to you, I will.
Yes, sir. If you will, I'll follow up on that. Yeah, if they're not serving you, we want to be able to serve you.
Okay. Got him, I'm going.
If there's a dead area, I guess, between Bladen and Pender, do you take care of that whole end challenge? They will not be, I don't know.
So it won't be in, no, ma'am, it won't be in.
That would be an AT&T territory.
Yeah, right. That's AT&T. I'm sorry.
They drew the lines.
They drew the lines, we didn't. Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
Are you serious?
Being a cooperative, we were formed by the farmers and the local, you know, that's, you know.
But if they're your star customers, you will.
If they're our star customers, we're gonna get every one of them with fiber. Yes, ma'am. And that's what we were saying. We were trying to thank y'all for y'all's letter of recommendation, because this $25 million grant, if we were to get that, that's gonna take care of all of it.
I got a question, if a church upgrade from a regular account to a business account, would that increase, what impact would it have on the internet?
No impact other than we have a nonprofit rate for churches, and they can get the faster rates at lesser speed. So they would be paying residential rates.
Because the private sector is that.
Let's see.
That's for nonprofits.
The reason I was looking at that is in the home, I got one speed, and then the affordability of going up gets higher and higher and higher.
I understand.
That's why I was noticing.
We're gonna absolutely, you know, obviously if we can pull some of these grants where we're not having to come out of our personal pockets to do so, we should be able to definitely, we're gonna be very competitive. Yes, sir.
But you know, we have fiber optic now already through you guys, and it varies though. You know, when I say it varies, we do the programs live on Facebook, and sometimes it almost shuts down like it's weak.
I'll be honest, what that probably is your Wi-Fi, and there's a difference between your route. The fiber goes to the edge of your house or in your home, it's the speed of light. So it's not gonna be that, it's normally the equipment that's either inside, and I'll be honest, just like, you know, Robin can say here, you know, trying to get internet in this bomb shelter is very difficult wirelessly. It's just hard. Churches especially hard because they've been added on to, remodeled, added to, and these walls. But we have consultants that will come to any location free of charge, go through it, test it, and see if we can get you a better.
Probably need to upgrade then.
Yes, sir, you probably do, yeah. Right, bigger fiber, yes, exactly right.
And Commissioner, I was raised old school, so I still want a hard line to everything that I've got. My house, I don't like the Wi-Fi. I mean, my dad was a telephone man. He said, you need a wire from here to there. You can't beat it. You can't beat it. So if there's any way you can get a straight Ethernet cord right off of our ONT, you're gonna be happier.
Right.
Thank y'all for coming.
Absolutely. Thank y'all for everything. Appreciate everything.
Thank you. Ask one last thing.
Charter Communications, Eric Collins, Director of Government Relations.
Good afternoon. Eric Collins, Director of Government Affairs for Charter Communications. I looked at your agenda and I saw the front page and I said, well, they had a sort of short agenda today, and I looked at the back and I said, gotta make this brief, but give good information. So I was talking with Mr. Martin, and Charter Communications is looking to maximize all the federal fund or grants, state grants that's out there in order to bring broadband. What we know, and the board knows, that through the pandemic, there has been a lack of access to broadband. Some based on cost, but we will discuss that in just a minute. But a lot of it's because of the unserviceability, just not being available. So with our current footprint where Charter serves, we serve most of all of the municipalities in the county. Then we bleed out into the county where we provide at least gig service. All of our plant is hybrid fiber coax system. We provide gig service for those residents or businesses that want over a gig. If they're willing to pay, they can get as high a service as they want. But the purpose of the meeting today was to discuss the North Carolina State GREAT Grant. It's a grant that was put together by the state. If I go to the next slide, please. It's a state grant that we're going to talk about. But before that, Charter won an RDOF award, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. It is a federal award that the FCC did a reverse auction bid on. And what they required providers, if they wanted to compete for this grant or these awards, they had to reverse bid, and the lowest bidder received census blocks. So what the FCC did, they went all over the country and they chose census blocks. The providers didn't choose the census blocks. The FCC chose census blocks and said, these are the census blocks we're going to release all over the country, and providers could technically go in and reverse bid to the lowest bidder on the reverse bid. So Charter was awarded in Bladen County 640 addresses, which is households, that Charter is currently building. And if you look at the map here, it's very hard to see, but up on the very northwest portion, you'll see some dark blue. I don't know if you can make it out on the map, but there's some navy dark blue there that for those 640 addresses that we won RDOF award to. There's an additional award down in the very southeast portion of the county, in that corner, that I guess borders Pender. Yep, it borders Pender. So between those two census blocks along the northern portion west and that portion of the east, we're going to be building those areas using RDOF funds. And because of our current footprint in the county, when we looked at the RDOF award, it only made sense for us to look at additional unserved areas in the county. We're looking at the North Carolina GREAT Grant. And next slide, please. So the North Carolina GREAT Grant, you're probably familiar with, was $350 million that the state put towards the state for grants to build out broadband in North Carolina. These funds came from Arpa Funds. They were American Rescue Plan funds that went to the state, and the state allocated funds across the state. And the way they did it this year was pretty interesting. When they did the grant, they looked to make sure that every county had an opportunity to win an award through the state grant. By doing that, they allocated $4 million per provider. With those $4 million per provider, that means there could be multiple providers that could be awarded a maximum amount of $4 million. And that maximum amount is what Charter or any other private provider could receive if they chose to apply for the grant. And what's eligible in these grants is any unserved household that receives lower than 25 by 3. The FCC sets the definition of what broadband is. And the FCC determined that 25 by 3 megabytes per second, 3 down, anything above that is deemed broadband. Anything below that is not broadband. They consider it unserved. So that's where the eligible households come from. The North Carolina NC Bio, who manages the Great Grant, what they look at is they pull a map together. That map is not something the state does. The FCC has a map that they create from 477 data that all providers have to submit to the FCC. In those census blocks from the 477 data, they pull from that data and they determine across the country, these are the households that's unserved. So with that, what the state didn't do, they didn't create a map. They simply used the FCC 477 data map. So when doing that, the state determined, okay, these are the households that providers can apply for and no other areas. They determined, just like RDOF, they determined where providers could apply for a grant for. So it's not something that Charter did or any other provider. The state determined that in a map. So the funding for the state Great Grant is up to 70%. Now, again, you get back, it's up to 70%, but it's a maximum of $4 million per provider. So if you have 2 providers, you get $8 million that the state will award. So the funding provider in the application, I want to say the word require, but I don't want to say the word require. What the state looks at in the broadband grant is stating that it is very good that if a county who has reserved ARPA funds for the deployment of access for broadband with a provider, your application scores a lot better. So in other words, if I could go to a county and I speak before a county and I share with in the county and just having ARPA funds, I asked the county if they would be willing to partner with Charter Communications in deploying broadband out. Now, initially, the state had initially said, well, if a county received over $8 million in ARP funds, it would be good if that county could contribute $1 million. I've spoke at many county commissioners meetings. And even those that have over $8 million in ARP funds. I live over in Robeson County. I've been in this business for 29 years. Actually used to manage the cable system and build cable. I was the GM here. You guys probably remember Pat Smith. Pat Smith worked for me many years ago. But getting back to that point, what I want to say is there's so many infrastructure needs that the county has that you can use your ARP funds to build out. There's no way Charter's going to come to the county and say, you know, we'd like to have $1 million for your partnership towards a great grant. We'll talk about that in a minute about the partnership itself. So the application process requires a partner with Bladen County. Again, it bolsters the application score by the county submitting or committing to any dollar amount. There's a multiplier in the application where it gets competitive. If a county does not contribute any ARP funds, or if they have no ARP funds commit to it, then all the winners go into a pot and they review them, and it's based on who has the best score. And that best score, when the county commits to a partnership, that score multiplies. And through that multiplies, then what it does is helps the application be really looked at as a potential award to the partnership of the county. We talked about the one unserved map. What we're building now is a fiber to the home. Everything that we're doing RDOF, and when the Great Grant is going to be fiber to the home. I want to touch just a minute on on our low-income offerings for affordability. And I think Mr. Pompeo asked that question earlier. Charter provides and we provide what we call Spectrum Internet Assist. Spectrum Internet Assist is a program that we've had for a long time. And the way the program works, it is any student in the household that receives free or reduced lunch is a pre-qualification for Spectrum Internet Assist. Through that Spectrum Internet Assist, like other counties, some counties, the entire county receives free or reduced lunch. So all students, can pre-qualify for it. So with that service, just 35 by 3 speeds with fiber or with coax that we have, fiber coax at $17.95. And then they have the option of a Wi-Fi network. We're also a participant in the broadband benefit program. I don't know if the county is aware of that. It's a broadband benefit where the customer can actually call into a website, and it's a government-controlled site. And what the government, this broadband benefit, which came about because of the pandemic, COVID, the government will pay $45 toward each month of their broadband. That's not something that we're just a participant in it. We're not the controller of that. We're a participant of it. So if a resident is the federal government or the managing agent of that, they handle it and they make the payments back to us, and that's how that's set up. So those are the low affordability offerings that we have. Let's get back to the GREAT grant. The GREAT grant overall cost, we're looking at somewhere a little over $10 million in the grant. Great thing about that is that we're not looking for a heck of a lot of money from the county. We're just looking for what I call skin in the game, where it makes the application, bolsters the application. Charter is going to fund most of the commitment. If the max amount we can receive from the state, if it's $10 million, is Charter's going to have to come up with about $6 million because of the rural areas that we're looking at building. The number of passings, we're looking at 2,173 passings. Next slide, please. Next slide, if you take a look at that, you'll begin to see those red dots of the areas that the North Carolina broadband office has stated that these are the eligible households for a GREAT grant. So within these eligible households, I also included RDOF. You'll notice in the RDOF areas, they're pretty close to where RDOF is at or where our existing plan is at. So there's 2,173 households, and you add, and what we're going to do, we're going to leverage our RDOF award, which we can't use the GREAT grant money to build RDOF because you have to use RDOF, the RDOF funds for that. So there's a total of 2,813 addresses that we're looking to build out. When I say leverage the RDOF award, in the RDOF award, the federal government gives providers 7 years to build out. For you guys, you don't want to hear 7 years. I want to hear next week. I want to hear next year. So what the GREAT grant does, the GREAT grant has a requirement that has to be built out within 10 years of everything. So what we do is we leverage our RDOF with the GREAT grant, and we combine them together from the standpoint of construction timeline, not money. So the 2,813 addresses will be built within the guidelines of the 2 years required under the GREAT grant. So in other words, we take those 640 addresses, instead of waiting 7 years or 5 years to build them out, we're going to move that right into the GREAT grant and just roll it in and build it all at the same time instead of waiting. And to be honest with you, in Bladen County, we're not going to wait anyway. We wouldn't wait on the 640 addresses at all. We would build those as we go through. Next slide, please. So the unserved locations and passings are 2,173. I've talked about what the state is willing to do and put toward this as a $4 million. but with Charter Communications, we're looking at putting most of the match up. So at the end of the day, what I'm asking the county is the county has ARP funds. Any amount that you're willing to contribute to make the application competitive against all the other applications. I've been before some counties wanted to put $2 or $3 million in. That's because they had received a lot of ARP funds and broadband was at the top. But there was also been before counties that received ARP funds above $4 million. They had a lot of other infrastructure, and some of them wanted to commit $500,000. But what I'm asking the board, I'll let you make that decision, because I've received commitments from counties down to $125,000. Charter doesn't care, because you know what your infrastructure needs are across the county besides broadband. We'll make up the difference. Charter will make up the difference in capital to build out with the partnership with the county so that you can use your infrastructure, your ARPA funds for infrastructure other than broadband, even though you may have appropriated some. So if whatever amount the county wants to contribute to that, if they're interested in a partnership, and we're very interested, then that amount that the county determines would work.
I just heard Star and I just heard you, and to me, I need to see this. I don't need to hear what I'm saying. And I thought we were going to get an overlay of where we had broadband and where we didn't. So I personally need more time. So I would make a motion we table this so we can get an overview of where we do have cable, because they're kind of, I understood them say that some of the areas you're talking about, they're already going in there.
Yeah, and that's.
Well, I see it. I can't make a decision, so I would make a motion we table it.
Okay. Well, the cutoff date is May 4th for the Great Grant. So that's the time frame if the county wanted to partner.
Before that was the thing that Ms. Peters was thinking on the same terms. I'm looking at all these providers supposed to be giving services to the county. We got AT&T, we got CenturyLink, now we got Charter coming in, we got Star Communications. We need to know what pieces are missing, because it seems like we're gonna be duplicating some of the same stuff if we do it that way. What I'm saying, I don't precisely know what you're directing to, because he came in and laid out a certain portion of the county that on the far end of the county, and then now he said where he was going on the map, then it looked like he was kind of touching that area over there.
Yeah.
And I need to know whether or not Star is in that area. Who's where? Because see, you coming in and
right
now you want to be a provider, but you're not willing to use your provider.
We're already a provider in this county. Yeah, we're already a provider, but you have to understand, we don't create the maps. We don't create, Star Telephone doesn't create the maps of what you can go after. Even reconnect funds, there are certain requirements and protections from any provider, and it's based on census blocks. All information is based on census blocks. And here's the interesting thing about census blocks, which is not the fault of anyone. What the FCC determines is that if you have 100 households in a census block and 10 homes are served in that census block, the FCC determines all 100 homes are served. It's considered as served as a census block.
You make sure I understand. Now, I heard you say spectrum.
Yes.
That's you the provider.
That's correct.
Spectrum.
That's correct.
So you're a spectrum.
That's correct.
You want to fill in all the voids that everybody else is missing with Charter.
Well, we're not filling in the voids. We're filling in only what the state says that we can fill in.
You can fill it.
That's correct. It's not us. The state determines where those unserviceable addresses are at based on the FCC 470.
Yeah. No disrespect, but I mean, I've heard two different stories here today. So I personally make a motion to table it because I don't know. I need to see it.
I have a question, but my question for Spectrum is, and I'm gonna talk about, I know you came to East Arcadia, Spectrum did in the last 3, we didn't know. I know they walked in and they dropped fiber on 2 streets, and that was it. Mm-hmm. Then we found out when ATMC came in, we found out from other people that, oh, well, yeah, they came to this street. They went this street, but they were halfway. We have people, you went down on half halfway the street, so the people at the other end of the street, they don't have service. That, store does not serve them.
Right.
AT&T does, but they're not doing broadband.
Right.
So how do they get service? I mean,
It's through a serviceability. I mean, in other words, if there's a resident calls and they say they can't get service, a serviceability is typically completed or an address is given to customer service. And they request a serviceability. They look at that standpoint. If it's a fiber network, if it's a fiber to the home that we did out of Regalwood, then you can pull a drop a lot farther using fiber than you can with hybrid fiber coax.
well,
And it's, I know what you're saying. So, but if it's going down a street, providers, if they're going down one street, well, we serve both sides of the street. But now if it's an extension to that street,
the last,
right,
800 yards.
800 yards. Yeah, then it's pretty much the same serviceability that has to be done. If I knew had the address, we could do a serviceability and have that take a look at.
I have any.
But if it's fiber, typically it's serviceable because you can pull a fiber drop a lot farther than you can pull.
Okay, and that's why I asked Star, because they on one side of the street and the other folks don't have any broadband, because Spectrum didn't finish the AT&T stuff. So, I mean, you did the same thing. You, a 2/10 mile, you stop.
I think one thing that we as commissioners going to our meetings in Raleigh, when the governor gets up and speaks, and he says, every home in North Carolina will have access to the internet, broadband. I think that's the question we should be asking here when we're hearing that we can do this area because they say we can in this area. I think the question I would have for all the people in this county, we need to see who and what is offering to every house, just like I mentioned about our own, because we are held accountable. And people think we can just say, yeah, I'm going to have you broadband in about 3 weeks. They look at us, and I'm sure they get the same questions I got. But that's what we're hearing now. We've been hearing this for about 4 years out of Raleigh. You're going to have it next year. But I think that's the big picture.
Yeah.
Is I think that's
universal service.
The questions that I hear is being asked, that's the confusion part to all of it.
Right.
We need to know from everybody whom and all is going to make it provide for every household.
We don't know where Star Telephone's at. We don't know where CenturyLink. We don't know where all their footprints at.
And I'm sure y'all got the same question. How they're saying that.
Absolutely.
Y'all can do it. How can you do that?
And that is, excuse me, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, to kind of echo whatever Dr. Mungo's was saying, that the story on the street, as far as customer service, whether it's Star or Charter or Spectrum, most individuals, they call, and like Dr. Mungo was saying, and it's just common everyday people, I'd like to get service on my house. Oh, I'm sorry, well, we just don't offer it yet because there's not enough customers there yet.
Oh, yeah.
And so in their mind, and that's what's told to them on the telephone, it's very confusing. And not only that, but it's usually very expensive.
For the construction portion of it.
That's exactly right. And so I think moving forward in their mind, they're thinking, okay, well, I guess I've got to wait around and we'll get some more customers and then you can get hooked up. So it is very frustrating in that regard, whether it's Star, Spectrum.
Absolutely.
The question I'm asking, you guys have to market your product, and that's Star, and that's all you got. Is it any way possible that y'all can give us a map of your potential customers, who you're marketing, where you located at, who's on what?
I asked for that about 40 minutes ago.
Yeah, that's what we need. We need to look at something that if Star can market for certain areas, then we need to know what they market. We need to know what you can market.
The map,
so
the NC1 map is the map.
Oh, see, we don't know who's that.
The NC1 map, it's on the North Carolina NC Bio website. It shows all providers, where all providers are located. Yeah.
I was saying like the potential customers, if you know, if Star looking down there and where you talking about going with Great Grant, say, well, is this a market that's available for us to access?
Right. Again,
Touch into them?
yes, sir. But again, we don't choose the market. The state chooses the unserved households, not the company.
Right. All right, I'd like to end maybe one, because we got to go on with all
Yep.
stuff. And this is for the two of you, really. How do you feel like the question that I asked, so we can answer to the people? Is every household, in your opinion, gonna have access and availability of broadband in Bladen County?
Yes.
And I mean, but how do we, I guess like you said, through the NC1, but if you get the providers and do it. But I like that answer, yes. But I'm still sitting here and I always use me for an example. And that's what I do all the time is, I don't know who and when is gonna help me in my situation, so how can I tell who's gonna help somebody else in their situation? And I think that's where we at as commissioners, that we need to be able to answer some questions that we have no idea.
Right.
And I think it's a fair.
Yeah, it is.
analogy to the problem that
It's a very fair question, but I leave the council with this. A provider, when it comes to grants, don't choose where you go build. The state determines that, and we just go after what the state says. It's a, there.
And we thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Go ahead. All right, go ahead.
Okay. But
Order break.
can you help me though with this? It starts up in that corner up near Holly or Township over there at the top.
Mm-hmm.
You guys are over there too? You going to,
We're not there now
you plan to though?
because we want to art off up in that area, that blue section from the federal grant.
Okay, so you both
Yeah.
apply for the same?
No. We have already won art off.
Okay.
Maybe this will settle some of the confusions. There's so many federal governments out there that's giving broadband funds out.
Okay.
You have USDA Reconnect funds. You have FCC RDOF funds. You have the state's Great Grant funds. If you received an award a year ago, if that project hasn't been completed building, then those households are still on the FCC map because they're still showing unserved because the provider hadn't had a chance to utilize their grant funds. So until that project is completely built and the provider turns in the FCC 477 data back to the federal government or the state saying this project's complete, these households are served, it's going to continue to show unserved.
All right. And let me.
That's how you end up with overlap.
Got it. The address, 516 Moortown Road, Wickerwood. 516
So name it more.
Moortown Road.
Okay.
M-O-O-R-E, Town Road, in Wickerwood.
Last question, Doctor.
Uh-huh.
28456.
Just one final question, just to kind of get clarity, which I agree with you, Matt. If an MOU with Charter wouldn't negate anything with the other Star Telephone action or their grant or their,
No.
so they do not cancel each other and they do not
No.
in any way whatsoever.
If the two is applying for the same state grant, what happens is it goes to a scoring process. In other words, if both providers are looking for a broadband through the Great Grant, NC Bio pours the application and the lowest cost for that service, the provider who's providing at the lowest cost to build with the highest points win. They win. So that's why you can compete and have two providers coming in. And the other thing is some providers might serve another area portion they apply for, another might provide another. Based on that.
And Mr. Chris, as we discussed, that was the dilemma in this presentation tonight. That we thought middle of last week, Friday was the holiday, we received this presentation Thursday afternoon.
Yep.
And my comment to Eric was, we already have an application out, is this going to hinder our competitiveness? And I think it may, because I'm talking about one focus.
Yeah, but it doesn't, that's why the county says that you can have multiple providers.
I understand, but it is still a competitive.
Yeah.
The overall.
Overall is competitive.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So that's the dilemma. If we were under such a short window of time, we felt like the best thing was to let him have the opportunity to come speak to you.
And your process had to be confirmed by when? May
4th.
May 4th.
Right.
Okay, we got a motion to table by Mr. Peterson, a second by Mr. Hester. Already done it over here. Any further discussion?
Could I ask Mr. Peterson if we gonna get this tabled back? Do we do it a time frame somewhere before May the 4th?
Well, if we do it, our next meeting is on the 2nd. So if we make the decision amount or whatever we do, that's good enough time?
Yeah, it is. Because all I'm asking for, if the county wants to do $50,000 or $100,000, doesn't matter.
No, I wanna see the maps, man. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I see a map. I'm not gonna give you no money without seeing a map and see what's overlaying. You can tell me what you want to and start whatever you want to, but I need to see it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, NC1 map. NC1 map. North Carolina has a map.
All in favor, say aye. Opposed?
Yeah.
Thanks for coming, sir.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. Department of Social Services, Ms. Vicky Smith, Director.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm here this evening to ask for your approval, to put out the RFP for non-emergency Medicaid transportation to run for 30 days.
Motion. Second. Motion by Mr. Hester, second by Mr. Gillespie. Discussion, Ms. Speaker, got a question?
What, does it talk about the price? What is the gas going, what's the mileage going up to? And does it come down if gas comes down?
Currently, our contract is for $1.90 per mile.
So it was before.
Yes, it's been that way for a couple of years now. At this time, we don't know what they're going to propose. That's what we're going to be asking for.
Is these the same ones that you're talking about, the guys who do it now?
In the past, we've had 3 providers. This past year, we lost one. So the reason that we are wanting to put this out is to try to get that third one back, or get a third provider to help those first 2 originals.
Who did you lose?
We lost,
Treelon.
So that one got out, so you try to put that one in. You
Yes.
just divide it out the same way you always done?
Yes, sir.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Health Department, Dr. Terry Duncan.
Item number A is consider approving the memorandum of understanding for Resilient Bladen Coalition. That would be for the health department, which starts there.
Approved.
Got a motion by Mr. Bullock, second by Mr. Cogdell. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Item B, consider approving the medical service agreement with East Coast Migrant Head Start Project, and that's a renewal.
Motion approved. Make a motion by Mr. Cameron, second by Dr. Mungorns. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
And lastly, your consideration for approving the memorandum of understanding with Hurston University to allow a nurse practitioner.
Motion by Dr. Mungorns, second by Dr. Ellis. Any further discussion?
Where is that located?
Yeah, but I have to say that.
Where is it located?
It's one of those online.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Virtual. Thanks, ma'am. Finance Director, Lisa Coleman.
Evening to each of you.
Good evening.
I'd like to review the dashboard for 9 months ending March 31st, 2022. At the end of March, from the general fund, we had collected 75.51% of the revenues and spent 68.23%. In solid waste fund, we collected 76.83% and spent 60%. Emergency telephone, we've collected 19.99% and spent 16%. And the water fund, we have collected 78% and spent 40%. And as you know, in the Arpa Funds, we have collected 50% because they've sent us our first tranche. We should get the next tranche May, June timeframe. We haven't spent any of those funds at the present time. Any questions on the dashboard?
Thank you, ma'am.
On the federal inmate program, right now, we have an average of 80, when you average everything out, we're at 80 inmates, and that's what we budgeted for, so we're on track. And I think the last head count I got was 84, so right now, we're ahead of the game on that a little bit. And
I just have one question. Why were you negative on income, net income?
What?
On your,
that's right. Mm-hmm.
why is it negative?
Because we had the bond payment that was due in August. And so the full bond payment has been taken out, and we average out the rest of it for the rest of the year.
Okay.
And am I correct in saying the bond payment was paid out of the federal inmate program?
Yes, sir. 100%.
Thank
Good job.
Last thing I would like to talk about is, your consideration on, contracting with Debt Book. We have a new GASB 87 compliance report that we have to comply with LGC and GASB, and we have to have some type of program to do that. And I have contacted this company and discussed it with them, and they have 50 counties in the state of North Carolina that's doing the work for them now. Right now for Bladen County, it would be $9,750 annually.
Motion by Mr. Cameron, a second by Dr. Montgomery. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, is it renewed annually?
This is a 3-year contract. They'd like to see it at $9,750, but we can renew annually. And we have a 30-day out clause for any reason.
So what was you using prior to this?
We've never had anything. This is for leases. There's a new GASB standard out there, and if you have to say what the cost would be at the term, if we got out of a lease, if we were to pay it off, we have to have that booked into our financials from now on, starting June 30th of this year.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Information Technology, Robin Hewitt.
Motion to approve.
Second. Got a motion by Mr. Peterson, a second by Mr. Hester. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I want to know which one did you select? I couldn't tell. Is that the one at the very top?
Just go refurb.
All right.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Robin.
Advisory Board appointment, Bladen Borough Rural Fire District 2.
Motion to reappoint.
Got a motion by Mr. Griffin, second by Mr. Peterson. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Cape Fear River Assembly 1.
Danielle.
Reappoint.
Reappoint. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Culver Street Fire District 3.
Yeah.
Motion by Dr. Montgomery to reappoint, second by Mr. Bullock. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. District Town Fire District Committee 2. Reappoint. Got a motion by Mr. Bullock, reappoint, second by Mr. Gillespie. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Southeastern Community Action Partnership Board of Directors 1.
Motion to table for additional membership requirement.
Down the table by second, Mr. Bullock, second by Mr. Gillespie. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Thank you. Look at your advisory boards for May the 23rd, Dublin Fire District 2, Kelly Water Dyke and Drainage District 2. County Manager, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'll review the calendar very briefly. We'll point out tomorrow at 11 a.m. is the dedication of the Ronald Phillips Allen Jr. Bridge naming ceremony in Tar Heel at the Tar Heel Fire Department. Also tomorrow evening at 5:30 we have a special meeting regarding the budget and ARPA. On Thursday, the 21st from 1 to 5, there's a blood drive in front of the courthouse. And on Saturday, the 30th, from 5 until 10, Bladen County Relay for Life. Moving on over to May, we have the. No, you can give your new. Get your new. Okay.
All right.
I'm sorry. I didn't pick up the new one, sorry. JCPC meeting is on the 5th, on Friday, Saturday, the Relay for Life. And, I'm sorry, let me back up. On Friday, from 11 until 2, the Bladen Crisis Barbecue Plate fundraiser will take place. On Saturday, from 9:30 until 3:30, the 5th annual Bladen County Aim for a Cure ALS fundraiser will take place at the Allen Brothers. On Monday, the 9th at 5:30, the Health and Human Services Advisory Committee meets. The board has rescheduled its meeting, second meeting from the 16th to the 23rd on that. Also mentioned that on the 17th, 9 until 1, there's a blood drive at the sheriff's office. The White Lake Water Festival takes place the weekend of the 20th and 21st. And also on Saturday, the 21st, there is a community prayer service that will take place on the courthouse. Offices are closed on the 30th in observance of the Memorial Day holiday.
But back up on that 16th, Mr.
Yeah,
Martin.
16th.
The 16th commissioner meeting is changed to the 23rd.
Isn't that correct? Correct.
Okay.
Because it's the primary.
Right, okay,
Oh.
right. That's what we need.
If it was originally changed in March, and
Right.
To the 23rd.
16th to the 23rd, we changed to 23rd, right?
then, yes, sir. Thank you. There are no other questions regarding the calendar. Moving to item B, Mrs. Angela Hughes lost a son to fentanyl overdose sometime back. She is requesting to use the courthouse lawn for a candlelight vigil. That date is June 25th.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Peterson, second by Dr. Mungoin. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
And I want to just put this on the radar that, as you all know, you've approved the memorandum of understanding related to the opioid settlement. Here in the very near future, we'll need to appoint a steering committee. We've had a conversation this past week with ACT Associates and Sid Wyford regarding the need to update the strategic plan. If you may recall, there was an option A and an option B, and it's very prescriptive in terms of the requirements for spending the money as well as the reporting requirements.
How much was that money?
2.7 million or something like that. I think it's 2.7 million. Anyway, yeah, 2.7 approximately.
Don't feel everything. And that's coming to play.
That's paid out over 18 years.
Coming to play. Okay.
Over 18 years.
Over 18 years. 18
It's
years.
front loaded, the larger amounts.
Divided by 18.
So we're gonna use tomorrow.
But anyway, I just want to let you know that we'll be coming back to you in the near future to take the necessary action. And then I also wanted to update you on a couple of DOT related matters. Mr. Ken Clark, district engineer, held a meeting Thursday with local agencies related to a scheduled bridge closing that you probably heard about it by now. But anyway, just want to be sure you know, month of May, 2nd until Memorial Day, daily from 9 until 10 a.m. and 2 until 3 p.m. The one good thing that came out of this is that ambulances and law enforcement vehicles will be able to cross during that time. But as you can imagine, there are a lot of logistical issues that go into closing that bridge, and so there's all kinds of agencies that are having to help with that.
9 to 10, and what was the other?
2 to 3.
What date now?
Well, that's when the buses
Beginning
start.
May 2nd
May the 2nd.
and ending around Memorial.
May the 2nd.
That's pretty much the whole month of Memorial Day.
That's transportation
School buses, 2 to 3.
That's why they're thinking they'll be up and back up by the time the schools.
They haven't opened back up. Remember over
They
there?
come across the river, across like right after 3.
Yeah, but they also said they didn't know how well they'd be on that higher timeline, too.
I mean, there's a lot of challenges.
Yeah. How they gotta happen. I mean, they got
Well, the first 30, what I'm understanding, Nathan's gonna be, the first 30 minutes, they're gonna reroute the traffic because it'll take about 30 minutes to go to Tar Hill and come back around. And then after that, it's just as effective time-wise.
They're gonna catch them at the bypass
trucks and stuff.
instead of blocking up town here too.
Oh, okay.
They're trying to really work out.
You're all downtown. See, how does it work? Downtown was 2 hours.
And then while, moving on, item D, while he was here, I asked him about a bridge up, Elwell Ferry, I think. And he said that it's currently at a marina in Wilmington being repaired. They've also gone out for bids again for service providers. The deadline for that is May 6th. And so they hope to, award that shortly thereafter and get the ferry back in operation as quickly as possible.
And Individual delegation wish to address commission.
I'll sell it.
Matter of interest to commission.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry about that, yeah.
You're fine.
Jumping down there. I was telling Dr. Montgomery, I had a lady call from, council area about Elwell Ferry Road being just in what she felt like was in bad shape. And then some of that stretch of 211 in that area too, I guess around the old store there at council or whatnot. But anyway, I didn't know if we could send a letter like we've done just to Mr. Clark or, requesting maybe. She specifically said potholes. What's up?
It is.
Okay.
That's in, where we first.
Yeah, like Baltimore Center area.
It's supposed to be on the council at that,
Right.
back end of the.
Yeah, well, I have
Okay. On the GIS, when you go on there and you click on a certain property, used to, there was a tax data that you could click on, it would bring up the property card and stuff. It doesn't do that for a lot of the property. I mentioned something to Renee earlier about it. She said there had been a problem, especially in the Bladenboro, Abbotsburg area. It just brings up a gray blank box where it used to be very user-friendly. It's definitely not as user-friendly.
You got to put parcel in there somewhere.
Used to, you could just bring up the map. Click on-
It was having some problems about 2 weeks ago, I know.
And a lot of people right now are using it, I guess, because of the revaluation.
Especially for, like you see, the tax officer, just the information when you click the eye, click in.
You click the tax card, after you go to US tax data, it's just a gray empty box.
Mr. 1 second.
I got a question, regarding establishing 911 addresses. Mr. Martin, has there been a delay in doing that? Because gentleman contacted me and said he tried to get a 911 address established back in February. Said he left his phone number as well as his, email address, nobody contacted him.
After Chase left, seemed like no one. We still have some on my end, haven't been done.
911
He left
addresses.
it 2 years ago.
I got his contact information. I gave it to him when he finished. And the other one, there's a solar camera looks like on Mercer Mill Road near the, trash dumpster.
I saw that.
Why is that there? Well, a solar camera. It looks like a solar camera.
Solar panels on the phone.
That's Elizabethtown. Elizabethtown's done that. Elizabethtown's
Is that, it may be a camera, yeah, that is.
Yeah, they got a bridge. They're doing some of the bridges at Bladenboro River.
What kind of program they got?
CSC doing it in Bladenboro.
Yeah.
Where it is. It's a camera program, they got a grant for with the town.
I mean, are they researching stuff or what are they doing?
I can't take speed.
Trying to do what now?
It's speed.
And they just got back on that.
I don't get what they do.
Mr. Cogdell. No, the one I want to ask, we was into the conversation with Mr. Peterson and motion on the map, and I heard them say something about where to locate the map. If Mr. Martin direct us, can you email us
Oh, well, we
what
said it
they're
to you.
talking about?
That's the MC1 map, what do you say?
That's right.
But
I thought we were,
here's the challenge.
I was looking for the overlay. I thought we were talking about the overlay so we could tell where it was and where it weren't.
Well, the challenge is just like Mr. Collins indicated, it's hard to have one that shows everything that's already been applied for. I mean, it really is
I didn't understand that map, y'all.
But I mean, that all came up late last week. I understood it was gonna be a challenge tonight, but I didn't want to say it.
we need to know. We come up and see, and then he looked at it with the match. You got the state down to 70%, and then you looking at that would be 30 for us. And you want to. To me, it's just a lot of loose ends on what we're trying to do. There's too many loose ends.
I mean, you're saying if you don't do a contract, is that you lose it. But I would assume not. Somebody's gonna be that.
But what I'm saying is, do we need to look at this on a joint effort or something before we go in there? Just take it when we walk in here on the second. Because I'm trying to figure out how you can clear it up by the second when you just go look at it. The board gonna clear that up on the second.
Well, keep in mind, that one requires skin in the game.
That's what I'm saying.
Star is.
It's a different grant.
I don't understand why Star can't provide us an overlay and why all these other ones can't play us overlay, and then we put it on top of the county map. All you got to do is do it on instead of doing it on a piece of 8x11 white paper, you can do it on a Mylar screen.
Color coded.
And sometimes we gotta be able to see this before we walk in here to, we don't know what, cause if the great grant is gonna be sitting there, we trying to get everybody covered, and he's sitting there saying you got 640 people, that's not gonna be covered, period. You won't get no service.
Well, I think the biggest thing that confused me, and maybe y'all too, and speak up if that's the case. When we have been presented this every time when we've had a meeting in Raleigh, it's never been discussed about the counties and having determined what kind of money they're gonna give. It's just that every home in North Carolina will have broadband.
But what I'm saying,
No negotiating or anything has come into any conversations. Am I wrong in saying that?
no, what I'm saying, is, are we
So I'm
still,
confused on that.
what I'm saying, are we still gonna be looking at a situation that if we don't take a real concrete look like what Mr. Peterson said, you can have 640 people that are gonna be trying to figure out how to get service. That's what we're gonna be, still gonna be 640 people that will not have service.
Well, we don't know that, that's what that means.
That's what I'm trying to say.
I think too.
Okay, can I get a motion to go in closed session? Got a motion, motion to camera, also take a 5 to 8 minute break before we go in.
This conference will now be recorded.
Gillespie, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Can I get a motion?
Yes. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second by Mr. Gillespie. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much.